Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me like he often does, THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, Carolina's officially halfway through their ACC schedule, 5 games in, 5 more to go. And we're here today to give a little mid-season report on the Tar Heels, give some insight on what we think, some positives, some negatives. So it's going to be an exciting show for us today. But AJ, first thing I want to talk about, offense. I want you to give me a rating 1 to 10 on how you think the offense has performed so far this season.
8 wouldn't be justice. 9 would be giving them too much just because, Syracuse, they kind of walled up a little bit. BC, the first half at FSU, and even in the first half against State, they had a couple of opportunities where they probably should have gotten points and they didn't. And 8.7 actually should be very exciting to UNC fans because, wow, pretty good offense.
Yeah.
But there's room to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 10 in this case is achievable because that's a club playing at or near its maximum potential on a fairly regular basis. And if you want to achieve the goals that they have set for themselves, you need to be there, especially when you have a defense that probably isn't going to be great every week. There's a little bit more onus on the offense to be near great all the time. And I do think the parts are there. They just got to pass, protect a little bit more, can't drop the ball, and just kind of cash in sometimes when they get inside the 30. They 4 times against Florida State, they got inside the 30 and didn't get any points. Twice in the first half against NC State that happened. And in each game, they got inside the 10 and came away with no points. So you still have some things to work on, some things to fix. I think they'll get those things. They're really skilled, Jacob.
They are.
You don't have to know anything about football to look at this team and understand that they're skilled, and they certainly are explosive. But they can get better, and I think that they will get better. So that, to me, is the high end of what this club is doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good rating. I'll be different. I'll give them an 8.5 just to be different because I do agree with the points you made in terms of, there's still a lot of room for improvement from this offense, but like you mentioned, for Carolina fans, that's got to be pretty dang exciting because they have been, overall, barring first half against Florida State, barring some things against Syracuse, BC as well, I think this offense is kind of shown what they can do when they're clicking on all cylinders. So, yeah, I'll go with an 8.5 just to be a little bit different from you, AJ. What about defensively? What would you rate them 1 to 10? I'm assuming that's going to be a little bit lower.
It's not always good to assume, but in this case, you're spot on. I'm probably going to give them a 5.
Okay.
And I think a 5 is actually okay because what did we say back in August?
Mm-hmm.
If the defensive line's average, the defense should be above average, and that should be enough to win games. And had the offense cashed in one more time and those 4 misses inside the 30 in Tallahassee, the defense would have been played well enough to win. And they would be unbeaten right now and well on the path toward being unbeaten when Notre Dame comes to town. And ultimately, the statistic that matters most, that Larry Fedora used to remind us of all the time, is wins and losses. So they're 4-1. If the offense was a little better in Tallahassee, the defense would have been good enough to win the game. They'd be 5-0 right now. So I think what we saw Saturday against NC State was really, really positive, steering the nose of the defense in the right direction. 4 turnovers. They gave up 34 yards rushing, 1.8 yards rush, not 1.9 that I said the other day, which is huge. I think that the confidence this group got, the feel really good about yourself performance that they had in that game, and throw away the passing yards that State had. Some things that went wrong, some of the downfield stuff they're going to have to fix. State completed 7 passes, I think it was, 20 or more yards. Mm-hmm. Part of that is, Carolina's not super deep back there, and they were moving guys around the secondary all over the place. But at the same time, some of that stuff happened when the game was already over, so the stats are a little bit skewed. I would say a 5 with plenty of room to grow. Still a little bit limited on the defensive interior on the line. Don't know how good they can get, but if they as a group are consistently at the 5 level, then I think everybody else can be at 6.5 or 7. Mm-hmm. And if the offense is what we think it is, that's certainly going to put them in position to win every game they play up to Notre Dame and Miami. And then they're going to have to really scrap those out. We'll deal with that when they get closer to those games. But over the next 3 weeks, a 5 on defense or a 5.5 on defense, a 6 on defense should be enough to win those games.
I agree. I think if you would have asked me before the I think if you would have asked me before the NC State game, I would have. You probably agree. You'd probably be below a 5. I'll give them a. I think I'd give them a 5. I'll go a little bit higher. I'll give them a 5-5. I do think the State performance made me feel a little bit better about where this defense can go. So yeah, I'll give them a 5-5, and with a lot of room for improvement, especially like you mentioned when you consider the next opponents they have, especially.
I'm with you on that, provided they back it up. They've got to double down and back it up at UVA. Now, UVA doesn't have a great offense, and we'll get into a little bit about what they're going to be facing. But you can't go in and let Brennan Armstrong suddenly look like an all-ACC.
Yeah, like a Heisman.
You can't let him complete a bunch of stuff downfield and you score 45 points and you gain 580 yards, but you give up 450 or something like that. Mm-hmm. You need to be a little bit more thorough, with possession by possession in a game like that. If they do that, then I'll join you in the 5.5 range. Mm-hmm. But we'll do that next week.
Exactly.
No, maybe we'll do that in our 3 things video after the game.
Exactly.
Okay, AJ, how far did the defense move up that meter for you?
I think 5 is a fair rating, so I have no quarrels with that. What about 2 biggest strengths for the team so far? If you had to pick 2 to single out, what do you think those would be?
Well, the run game, number 1.
Yeah.
Javonte is amazing. Michael Carter's amazing. One of the things I love about covering college sports as opposed to pro sports is watching kids grow from when they arrive to when they leave. And it's not just how they deal with us, how they mature, but as players, you could see the grind without seeing the grind. Mm-hmm. And in Michael Carter, when you watch him turn the corner, he's more explosive.
Oh,
and he gets upfield a little bit quicker. He sheds tacklers more now. He runs with a little bit more of an aggression than he did before, and he always ran with aggression. You see it more. He gets better results because he's better. You can see that the grind, when everyone else is dealing with the pandemic and woe is me, Michael Carter was grinding his you-know-what off to get to where he is now, and he's a very good college player. Javonte Williams, same thing. I mean, he's becoming legendary for running people over, and for good reason. But you took a photo Saturday on a Michael Carter run. It looked like a counter play or something that they ran till it was off left tackle. Mm-hmm. And the hole was huge. You could have driven a Mack truck through that thing. Mm-hmm. I could have waddled through that hole and not gotten hit until I was in the second level. Okay? Well, maybe not. The point is, the offensive line is doing a really good job with run blocking. They're all doing very well with run blocking. Most of the penalties that I can recall, I haven't divvied it up, occur more in the pass block situation. Mm-hmm. Pass blocking hasn't been great, but they were pretty good. NC State only had a couple of hurries the other day, and a couple of sacks, a couple of hurries. That was pretty much it. That was certainly an improvement from Tallahassee. But the run blocking, it's the line. It's tight end Garrett Walston doing a great job. Kamar Morales is getting better at it, and the receivers are blocking well downfield. Even Sam Howell laid a guy out the other day. So the run game, absolutely the run game. The other thing, I'm going to say Sam. And people are, Sam doesn't look like he did a year ago. Sam is a little bit of a different player, using his legs a little bit more. And I think that the pressure that they're playing with offensively is different than a year ago. A year ago, it was like house money all season long. Mm-hmm. Even when they rolled into Annapolis for the ball game, there's a lot more pressure on Sam now. He doesn't catch anybody by surprise. People are game planning specifically for him. And the first 2 games, he didn't have any completions 20 yards downfield. But guess what? He's racking them up now. He's getting more and more of them. He's had some drop. If he didn't have some of these drops the last couple of weeks, his numbers would be really off the charts. Oh, yeah. And he's picking up steam. I would not be surprised here down the road. They win a game. Maybe the run game isn't great against somebody. They sell out and say, we got to slow Williams. We got to slow Carter. And Sam has a big game, and that arm leads him to victory. I think some of the things that weren't working well earlier, I think he sorted through those things, and he is primed to have a big game when they need him to have a big game. And that might be the day after Thanksgiving when they need it. Mm-hmm. So Sam, I think, is really starting to play very, very well. He's learned some stuff. You can see he's a more mature player. He's got to throw the ball away. Can't run out of bounds with a 9-yard loss like he did the other day, but he knows that. And, he's human. Everybody's going to make mistakes. I had typos in my story the other day, and I know not to do that. I know to read better. Put my reading glasses on when I edit my piece. and let it roll. So I think the run game and Sam are huge positives.
Those are good shouts, AJ. Really good shouts right there. I can definitely agree with both of those. What about two biggest weaknesses for this team so far?
Well, run defense. They were pretty good the other day. The first two games, as Max said, you can almost throw them out. They count because they happen, but look, Syracuse had a new offensive line, and their top two running backs opted out a week or so before the season started. BC ranked conventionally 10 times, no challenge there. So two of the last three, they've been really challenged in the run game. They played much better this past weekend. They made their run fits better. Chaz even told us that after the game. Fans hate hearing run fits, and send me emails. What do run fits mean? Well, watch the game, you can see. And they did a better job at that. And they need to be better. They need to be average or slightly above average for the defense to be good. And look what happened Saturday. They were that. But I think it's going to be a problem until they can develop more depth. But getting Miles Murphy as many snaps as they did over the weekend, that's huge. Clyde Pender got in the game. His hands getting healthier. They need to find a fourth guy and then hope that at some point, maybe by the time the Irish come to town, they've got a fifth guy that they trust and they can give 15 or 20 snaps to reduce the wear and tear in-game and otherwise on Tamari Fox and Ray Vahasek. And if they do that, it'll make Fox and Vahasek a little bit better, especially late in games. So the run defense to me would be number one. Number two would just be special teams in general. They weren't terrible the other day, but still missed a 22-yard field goal, clanking off the upright. If they could have a clean special teams game, I think they would celebrate that as much as anything.
Absolutely.
So special teams is an issue. They're not returning stuff. They're not allowing big returns, but they're just messing stuff up all around. They got to get that cleaned up, and they are the kind of things that can be cleaned up, Jacob. So I would fully suspect that in the next month that they're going to get a lot better and more efficient on it. They may not be explosive. They may not win a game on special teams, but you don't want to lose them on special teams. And one could argue that they kind of lost the Florida State game the way it played out because of special teams. They lost for a lot of reasons, but if you want to isolate special teams and say, there you go, and that's numero uno, nobody would tell you you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. And let's switch the focus from the team as a whole to individual players now for a second. Any surprise players on this team? Because this to me is I was thinking all this off air a little bit, and this is, to me is a bit of a tough question because I think there's a lot of guys out there that have been playing pretty solid for this team. Now, I don't know if I would consider them the way they're playing surprises to me, but I'm really interested to see what your answers are for this question, AJ.
So the two biggest surprise players?
Yeah, if you had to pick two.
Well, surprise, a lot of times people think, well, that means you had low expectations. It's like coach of the year always goes to a guy whose team was picked to finish near the bottom and they finished in the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
And I've always thought that, well, I think coach of the year is if your team's picked to be great and they are great. Mm-hmm. You didn't flub it up or you still have to make them great. We've seen a lot of examples when I can't stand when people say, well, I could win with that team. No. You've got it. There's so much that goes into it.
Oh, man.
And that all being said, I'm leading up to something. I think Josh Azudu.
That was one of my shouts, yeah.
Look at how much better the offense has been since he came back. Mm-hmm. And the other day, Richards gets a holding penalty, which brought back a big play that ended up stalling a drive. And Azudu moves to left tackle, and he's there for the next two series, and Richards is on the bench, and he's learning. Azudu gives them the ability to pull a young kid like Richards out of the game and get some education, get some talking with Stacy Searles, kind of watch Azudu at his craft, going from left guard to left tackle seamlessly, and just how much he may, if Jordan Tucker got banged up and he had to move to right tackle, he could do that. He could play anywhere but center in that group. And what you've got is an all ACC caliber guy that could play in any of those four spots. So to me, when you see the way that they run off guard and the success they have there and how much better Brian Anderson's been since Azudu came back, I think Josh Azudu is number one. Number two, I'm going to go with Trey Morrison. Mm-hmm. And again, we already knew Trey was really good. But, guys, he's playing corner, nickel, and safety in the same game sometimes. And Bateman joked about it a couple of weeks ago. I want to see him playing all those in, like, the same series. Well, because they've lost so many guys, they've almost gotten to the point where they have to. But isn't it a great thing having a kid that mentally can go from one spot to the other and not miss a beat? And he's athletically, physically capable of handling all those roles and being a really high-end player for them. And because of that, he's allowed them to work some other guys in and give them opportunities. And, okay, it worked okay with this kid, maybe not okay with that kid. So, Trey, you're going back over here this week. He kind of gives them in the back part of the defense a little bit what Ezeudu does in the offensive line. And when you're a team that doesn't have tremendous depth and tremendous experience depth, having those two guys on each side of the ball is enormous. It's a big reason why I think this team is going to continue to get better. It's one reason they're 4-1 and almost 5-0.
AJ, I agree with both those picks. Joshua Ezeudu and Trey Morrison were guys that were kind of lingering in my head of two. One guy I'll throw in there real quick is Tyrone Hopper. I think he's a guy that's been around the program for a while, has dealt with injuries. And then it kind of in fall camp comes along and the offseason comes along and you start hearing his name a lot now that he's finally healthy. And, I mean, now he's a guy that's, playing a ton of snaps on that defensive line. Do you agree with him maybe being in there too?
Yeah, if you're copying a little guy who's a little bit under the radar when the season started, I knew Ezeudu was good. I didn't know he was that good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I knew Morrison was good, but I didn't know he was a freshman. We talked a lot about him because he was one of the few bright spots. So he was part of the narrative every week. Mm-hmm. Last year he wasn't so much. He was out. He missed a little bit of action, and everyone was talking about Chaz. We were talking about Kimmel. Hey, Tamon Fox is really playing well. Boy, look at Tamari Fox's potential. So people stopped talking about Trey Morrison a lot. So I knew they were both really good. But they're really, really, good, damn good players. Mm-hmm. So they've been better than I expected. But if you're talking about guys that were under the radar, I mean, when defenses made plays, it's not uncommon to see number 42 wreaking some havoc. He may not be great snap to snap, mm-hmm. but he certainly can make plays. And the last couple of weeks, he's been heavily involved in some of the turnovers that they've created, and that's huge. You force a turnover, you can make up for a couple other plays that don't grade out as well that are 5-yard, 6-yard gains for the opponent. So, mm-hmm. yeah, I'm with you on that. There are several guys, but I just wanted to go like these dudes went from here to up here. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to disagree with you about Hopper at all. I think it's a good call.
Yeah, I think your two were good shouts as well. I like your kind of reasoning for them as well. You knew they were good, but not as good as they've been so far.
No, they're NFL good. They're both NFL good.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. They're guys that definitely have a lot of potential to play at the next level. Let's look ahead a little bit, AJ. Carolina's got 5 ACC games remaining this weekend coming up at UVA. Then they go at Duke, Wake, Notre Dame at home, and then finish at Miami. AJ, I did a little digging. The combined records of UVA, Duke, and Wake is sitting at 5-11 right now. Notre Dame and Miami 10-1 right now. So it's quite the contrast in terms of the next 3 games versus, the final 2 games that Carolina plays. Now we don't know how the rest of the season is going to pan out, and those records could really shift. But looking ahead, the next 3 games are very favorable. Carolina can win those games. Then you've got 2 showdowns against Notre Dame at home, which I think everyone's expecting regardless for that to be a really, really big game. And then you've got Miami to end the season, who Miami's playing really well right now as well. So, I mean, Carolina's got a relatively easy schedule, but then you also consider that UVA, Duke, and Wake are all rivals as well. So it's an interesting end to the season in terms of the ACC games for Carolina, isn't it, AJ?
Well, I think the Tar Heels learned in Tallahassee that seeing a game as an easy game can be a really dangerous
thing. Come back to bite you, yeah.
UVA is 1-4, but it kind of sounds corny to say this, but they're kind of I wouldn't say they're good 1-4, but they're better than 1-4. I think there's something there. I don't think they're trash like a lot of people might think a 1-4 ACC team is, especially up there. It's not like the Tar Heels have had a lot of success in Charlottesville the last 30 years. No. When Mac Newton his first time around, they struggled. They couldn't win up there. First game I ever covered in my career was '96 game in Charlottesville, which is still one of the biggest losses in UNC history in terms of what was at stake that day. There were lots at stake this weekend going up there. It's a physical team. They're going to play a team that's going to come out and beat them up or try to beat them up. They're not going to back down. It's an enormous game for UVA to try to turn its season around and maybe steer in the direction of getting into the postseason. A lot of pride there, defending division champs, all that kind of stuff. But if the Tar Heels want to make the Notre Dame game an incredibly big game, they got to take care of business.
For sure.
And, I talk a lot about growth, a lot about the process and all that kind of stuff. Max only coached 18 games. A lot of people are pointing to 21. Well, if you want to be able to better handle the expectations of 21 and the stages that 21 will bring, if they're as good as a lot of people think they will be, you got to have a couple of more of those stages this year. They had one last week at Tallahassee, but it was still a bad FSU team, right? Mm-hmm. Notre Dame at home the day after Thanksgiving, the build up to that would be an enormous stage, especially since Carolina's off the week before. Mm-hmm. So you're talking 12, 13 days of build up. They need the experience of playing in those types of games, of being in that type of environment, of being questioned over and over and over about this big game. That's how programs grow. But the only way to make that game matter is you got to go to Charlottesville and take care of business. Can't screw around. You can't defeat yourself against a Bronco Mendenhall team. When you go to Duke, you know you're going to get Duke's best shot. You can't take that game lightly. You got to take care of business. Then come home. Dave Clawson's teams get better. We're seeing that the last couple of weeks. They've beaten UVA and Virginia Tech. So it would be foolish to just chalk Wake Up as a gimme, especially until we see this Carolina team get more consistent, taking care of some of the things that don't always go well. So these are three huge games because they will make the fourth game in this stretch enormously huge. And if you take care of that, then you go down to Miami and play one of the biggest games in school history, in my opinion, especially if Miami keeps winning, which I think they probably will. So, whatever the narrative is about this season, Jacob, it's going to be laid out the next 5 games, not the first 5. That's all behind them now. They've set themselves up. Now they got to take care of business. I do think they have the personnel to do that. I think they have the coaching staff to do that. Now let's see if they can. We're going to find out everything we need to know about where this program is at the end of year 2 under Mac Brown after they get through Miami Gardens. They don't play in Coral Gables in football. They play in Miami Gardens, which is right down the road.
Yeah, it could be a very interesting game ending to the season if Carolina takes care of business over the next few games. And like you mentioned, you consider playing such a big game against Notre Dame, who's always a big opponent, and then having to end the season down in Miami, which could be a very big game. So it could be a very entertaining and very interesting end to the season if Carolina can, continue to put a string of wins together over the next few weeks. All right, AJ, last thing I want to talk about, I think we have to touch on it. It's been something that the Tar Heels have kind of stated as one of their missions this year, getting to the ACC title game. What do you rate Carolina's chances in that so far? And obviously there's a slip up at Florida State, which put a little bit of a damper in it. But, I think it's safe to say that it's still in Carolina's control. If they can win out, they'll probably end up playing down there.
Well, if they do win out, they will. Yeah. Because Miami would then have 2 losses, and Notre Dame plays Clemson in a couple of weeks. And unless Notre Dame beats Clemson, which is possible. Yep. If Notre Dame loses to Clemson on, I think it's November 7th, and Carolina wins out, well, then they would be the team that faces Clemson. And imagine they would play the last 3 of their last 4 games against Notre Dame, Miami, and Clemson. That'd be pretty cool.
It's a gauntlet, right?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And again, we would learn everything we need to know about this team.
Yep.
I think on a scale of 1 to 10, if we're going to go the 1 to 10 thing, I would say that the odds are about a 7 because they get Dame at home. And I would think that Miami, people who cover Miami or Miami fans may not be 100% sure yet who they are. They didn't. I know it was raining their day, but before the rains came, they weren't really moving the ball great against Virginia. UVA's got decent defense. I'm still not 100% sure that Miami is what some other people think they are. I think they're really good, but there are varying degrees of really good. I think Notre Dame is really good. And I'm not going to judge them on the Louisville game. Like Max said, don't take one game and fixate on it. You got to take the composite. And what they did the other day against Pittsburgh was awfully impressive. And I think that club will continue to get better. But I do think the Tar Heels have the firepower to beat those 2 teams. And they get Notre Dame at home. And there could be a lot more people in the stadium for that game than we've seen the last 2 home games. So I give the Tar Heels a pretty good chance, 7. But let's face it, they should be 7-1 when Notre Dame comes to town. They get that game at home, and on face value, probably a pick 'em or maybe a Carolina slight edge because they're at home, and they're going to be better than they are right now. And then you go to Miami. I would give Carolina a fair shot down there. I give them a fair shot at winning out. But the next 3 weeks, they've got to be really good. You can't go screw around in Charlottesville. You can't screw around in Durham. You can't survive against Wake and then be the team you need to be to win those last 2 games. You've got to be really good the next 3 weeks and go into those last 2 with a full head of steam.
I agree. It's gonna be a fun ending to the season. I think there's just a lot of a lot of storylines to watch. And that ever since the schedule came out, that Notre Dame and Miami game has always the ending to the season that Carolina faces potentially has always been super intriguing to me, because this is going to be, it could be two really, really big games. Because let's say Carolina wins out, beats Notre Dame. You're like, oh, they've done it. And then they got to go down to Miami and play a really good Miami team to end the season, have any chance to go into the, the title game. So, I mean, it's
cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but it won't matter if they don't take care of business the next 3 weeks. So
exactly.
I've told you before, and I've told Dean and others, when I cover Carolina or whoever at Duke, whatever it is I've covered in basketball, I often will determine, learn a lot about a team's national championship fiber in December when they play that period of games, when the students are gone, when they get, Norfolk State in town. Mm-hmm. I'm not picking on Norfolk State. I'm just using them as an example. Or Cleveland State's in town. How ready are they for those games? The teams that come out and blow doors and are fully ready, they're not sleepwalking, and they do it every time they play one of those teams. When they're doing it during that part of the season, it kind of tells me they have that fiber, the necessary fiber, to be ready later in the year. They're going to be a team that shows up and they're ready all the time. They kind of have that little extra level that a lot of other really comparably good teams might not have. So for Carolina to be a team that can beat Notre Dame and Miami back-to-back, they've got to be really good the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
You got 5 games in the books. You know who you are right now at this point. You know what needs fixing. Fix it and get better every week and make those games matter. It's totally within their control.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit cliche, but I mean, it's one game at a time. If you lose next week, nothing else really matters. You know what I mean? So one game at a time for the Tar Heels. AJ, that's going to do it for us for this podcast. As always, if you guys have enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, be sure to share it, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.